Hello, 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 and welcome to, or welcome back to,
A Little Birdie Told You.
I'm your host, Kristen Knight.
And I'm your host, Kelly Knight.
So I'm sure you all have heard of the phrases forgive and forget, or forgive but never forget. And they're two completely different phrases. And I want to go into what those phrases mean to us and our perception of them and which side of the spectrum both of us are leaning towards. So let's go into what forgive and forget means. First of all, what does even forgiveness mean? Like when you think of forgiveness and someone's like, you forgave them, or you're giving them forgiveness, what is that to you?
I feel like maybe it's something like if somebody did you bad on something or just like, I don't know, maybe they just did something to you and like...
You're giving them like this sense of like, I'm not going to resent you.
I don't know if you're like maybe forgiving them or like they're asking for forgiveness. Mm-hmm. I mean, it could go either way.
Well, someone can ask for forgiveness and say, hey, I'm sorry for this. And, I don't think all apologies are genuine. Mm-hmm. I just think it's a way to just get some sort of burden off of their chest and say, yeah, I'm sorry that I did this, but do you actually mean it? I think forgiveness, in my opinion, is it's not for the other person, it's for yourself. I think it's a way for yourself to have this sort of empowerment and realize you're forgiving yourself. Not only forgiving them, but forgiving yourself for putting yourself in a situation. But not only that, but just forgiving yourself and forgiving that person just for inner peace. Like, I'm just going to forgive this situation. It's done and over with. It happened in the past, and I'm going to move on from it. Mm-hmm. But the aspect that differs in both phrases is for the forgetting part. Like, should you forget it or should you never forget it? And keep that in mind, that you always have what that person did to you in the back of your mind for the rest of your life. Not even a person, but maybe like anything, any sort of circumstance. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
I mean, it kind of depends on what maybe somebody did to you. Mm-hmm. But I would definitely say, like, if maybe somebody cheated on you, I would definitely, like, I wouldn't forget the things people do to you because obviously that's, like, something that they're always going to do. Like, mm-hmm. I guess it's, like, a learning lesson that they just know to do. Or maybe it's something they just naturally do just that comes out of them. Yeah, like a habit. But, like, in general, I feel like you should forgive them. I feel like everybody should, like, forgive everybody, like, no matter what. I wouldn't forget the things that they do to you.
I think you should forgive. I think forgiveness, like I said, it's not about forgiving that other person. Mm-hmm. It's about you having inner peace
and just letting it go.
Moving on from the situation and letting it go. Because you're never going to evolve. And you're always going to have this sense of resentment towards that person if you never just forgive them. Just forgive them. Mm-hmm. Move on from it. I don't care how bad it hurts, and it might take some time to heal. But I think the best thing to do is just forgive them and just learn to move on and say, that happened. It's in the past. I'm going to forgive them. Even if it's kind of in the present, just forgive it. Just say, okay,
because
happened.
It's like a lot of people, I feel like people like forgive but like and forget, but like I feel like it's like I feel like you don't forget it because it's like in general like it's something
becomes
like,
a memory.
Yeah, it becomes a memory, and I feel like some people like go back to the past and like start overthinking on maybe that, and I feel like that's not healthy.
Or they have like that emotional trigger, like
or maybe, like that grudge against somebody, and I feel like it's just like it's like kind of having that feeling of like letting it go, but like also in the back of your mind when you're like maybe like somebody like does something, you're like, okay, like that's why like I remember like.
Well, forgiveness allows you to just let something go. Mm-hmm. And if you have a grudge or you're resenting someone, that's not forgiving them. That's still having that in the back of your mind. And I think that does tie into being forgetful or just forgetting something in general. Because when everyone likes to say they're independent. Like they say, oh, forgiveness is independent from forgetting. But I don't think they are, because I think when you forgive someone, if you don't forgive them, you have this resentment, and then it ties into a memory. And like I said, like you were saying, like you could run into something and that reminds you of that situation or something that happened. It doesn't even have to apply to relationships. It can just apply to friendships. It can apply to maybe just anything in your life where you feel like that they hurt you and you deserve an apology, and you want to forget it and you want to forgive them. And sometimes people are like, I'm not going to forget that, because like a relationship happened, like you said, someone cheated, and like if someone cheated on you, right? And you're going to forgive them. Yeah, it happened in the past. I'm going to move on. I'm going to let it go because...
Or maybe like even with a friend, maybe they left you out. Like I wouldn't forget that stuff because really like I feel like we've said this a lot. Like if they wanted to, they would. And that doesn't even go for relationships. That could go for like friendships too. Yeah. Like if they really wanted to invite you, they would have.
Yeah, I think that applies to every situation.
I think it really does.
I think it does. If you're in a situation like that, I know this is kind of off topic from the forgetting and forgiving, but if you're in a situation...
Forgiving and forgetting?
Yeah, forgiving and forgetting.
I think you just said forgiving and forgiving.
Forgiving
It's
and
okay.
forgiving.
We're not gonna worry about that.
Okay. But if you're in a situation and someone does something and you're like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like sometimes we make excuses. It's not a big deal. It's an excuse, right? That's like the same thing when you're forgiving someone, though. You might look at it and be like, oh, no, it's not a big deal. They did it once. They're not going to do it again.
Like, it's almost like you pull out all the red flags and just throw them away.
You paint them with green. Mm-hmm. We say this all the time, like, do not paint those red flags green, because it's like you're putting on a blindfold, and it's like they're clearly right in front of you.
The paint's going to fade away.
Yeah, and then the paint's going to fade away. I love that. And then not only that do you ever notice when you're doing something and you're in a situation and everyone else around you can see something and you can't? That's when you know you have the blindfold on. Mm-hmm. Because when everyone around you can see something and you can't, you know that something's going on internally in your mind. Because you know how everyone's like...
Because a lot of the times you cover up the red flags with green flags.
Make excuses.
And then your friends are over here, like, telling you, like, really, like, I don't really think that person's healthy for you. Or, like, whatever, maybe anything. But, like, I mean, it's the truth.
Like, you know, if you lost something and someone's like, it's right there, right in front of you. You're like, where is it? I don't see it. And they're like, it's right there. That's what I'm talking about. And that's kind of like when you're forgiving someone. But see, you can't forget. You can't forget. I don't think there's ever a way to forget. Like, actually, evidently, you can't forget something unless you have some sort of way to forget something that's, like, completely, like, I don't know, just, like, absurd. It's just interesting, but, right?
I feel like it always slips past your mind.
Yeah, I feel like it always slips back. So, like, for me, for example, I feel like anytime I've had something where I've, like, gotten hurt by someone, like, I'll have that, like, moment where I, like, go back and I'm like, dang, like, they really hurt me, didn't they? And, like, maybe I forgave them and I just kind of, like, blew it off. Like, no, it's not a big deal anymore. I'm not worried about it. But, like, at some point you look back in your memories, you know, if you're ever sitting there and you're kind of just flashbacking and thinking about your memories, and you think back and you're like, wow, like, my past self really was traumatized by that event. Like, that hurt. And then you look back and you're like, I can't forget that. And then that person comes back. Like, I know, like, this is why I think a lot of people follow with the forgive but never forget, is because they'll be in a situation and someone really hurts them and they did a series of events that really hurt that person, and that person tries to come back in their life and they got rid of that person. That person and that person, they went two separate ways. Two individuals, they just went two separate ways, right? And that person tries to come back into their life, and then they look at that person and a moment of just all these triggers come back up to the surface. They bubble up to the surface and they look at that person in the eyes and they're like, I could never forgive this person because of everything they put me through. They put me through X, Y, and Z, and they're trying to stand here right in front of me and they want forgiveness. They want me to forgive them.
So that's basically like, forget. Wait, no. Wait, that would be...
That's like
forget but never forget.
Yeah, exactly. And you're looking at them and you're just like, I'm not going to forgive this. And I can't forget everything you did to me. So why sit here? But then some people look at them like, I'll forgive you, but I'm not going to forget what you did to me. And you're not going to come back in my life. I'll forgive you. And, you know, I wish you well in the future with everything you did, but I'm never going to forget the things that you did to me. And that's why I kind of... that's what it's so difficult with this, because I feel like that phrase, both phrases apply to different situations. Like when it comes to relationships, and you said like cheating, I would forgive the person, but I would never forget they did that.
Because here's like an example. This can go with like, I'm just going to use the story as like the cheating one and like another one, just kind of make it sense where it's like relationships and friendships. Is like, for instance, somebody cheats on you. I honestly believe that once a cheater, always a cheater, because no matter how much somebody matures, I honestly think that's just like their habits, is they get used to it and they just kind of like are like, oh, this is like what I'm comfortable with. And then with like maybe a friendship, maybe you're like, oh, I'm just going to let this person go. And maybe in the future, like maybe they left you out. They bullied you. Maybe like they did a lot of stuff too that was messed up. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to forgive them, but like I'm never going to forget. And like you end up coming back and you're like, oh, maybe they mature. Let me try friendship with them again. And then it just starts all over again.
Yeah, and then you're not forgetting the aspects of everything they did to you. You're like, you're keeping in mind, yeah, they did this to me, so I'm not going to fall in that trap again. And this is why I support the forgive but never forget. It's kind of like a learning lesson. Like imagine you're in a learning lesson, and put this in the context of a learning lesson, and you're learning things on repeat lessons. You know how I always say, like when you get in a relationship or you get into anything in your life and it doesn't go as planned and you're learning these lessons and going through hardships and you have to keep learning the lessons until you achieve it. So it's the same thing. Imagine not learning the lesson and you forgive it, but you're not forgetting the fact that, hey, I learned this lesson from this and I grew. I'm never going to do that again.
In general, if something bad happens to you, and, like, obviously you never, like, forgot that or, like, really forgave what happened to you unless you actually look at it and you're like, dang, you know, like, I'm happy that happened because this lesson came out of it. Because...
And it's like this, too. It's like, imagine doing something and it doesn't work out. And then you move on to the next thing and that works out. You're not going to go back to that. You're not going to forget that you did that because you're going to remember, yeah, I did this. I know this doesn't work out.
This is where I came from.
Yeah, this is where I came from. This is where I am now. So I forgive that I did that to myself, but if I didn't do it, then I wouldn't have learned. So I'm going to forgive it, but I'm not going to forget it, because if I forget it, then I'm not going to remember that this didn't work out for me. And I think that applies to every situation. And that's somewhat why I support the forgive but never forget. Because if you do forget and you just let it go and let it slide, it's like, well, you're not going to learn that that's what you did wrong, and you're not going to remember, hey, I did this wrong, and I'm not going to move on and learn from it.
I guess it just goes to different, like, aspects in life. Like, with, like, certain, like, I feel like with people, it's, like, forgive but never forget. But, like, with different things in your life, personally, it can, like, it could be either one.
And then, see, sometimes things from the past, like, way back in the past, and then you're like, should I forgive them and forget it? It was in the past. Like, you know the saying, let bygones be bygones?
I honestly would just kind of let it be.
Yeah, I don't know. Because, and then it's like another thing. It's kind of like someone handing you a file of someone, and you experience that person and everything that person did to you, right? You're like, that, even if it was way back in the past, like 10 years ago, right? Or 5 years ago. And you know everything that person did. And you have a whole chart, just a list, like a file of everything they ever did to you, right? And you know, kind of like, we have all these files, right? And then someone hands you that. That's still on, that they still did that stuff. It's not like they didn't do that. And then you look at the file again, and they come back in your life, and they hand you it, and they're like,
that person's probably not really going to change.
I don't know if people change. People evolve and change, but I think habits do become character. And I do believe if someone hurt you once, kind of ties into giving someone a second chance. I think you should forgive someone out of your inner peace and having control over the situation, because you're not only forgiving them, you're forgiving yourself. And you're giving yourself this sense of empowerment and this sense of ability to just let go of resentment and let go of the grudge and just let go and move on and allow yourself to grow and not be in the stagnant cycle of repeating events, and just keep moving on. But I do believe that you shouldn't forget what someone did to you, because I think if you just allow that to go, it's not acknowledging the fact that they did do things wrong to you. And if they try to come back into your life, should you let them? Like, if someone took you for granted, should you just forget that they took you for granted? No, you're going to have to remember that. And I'm not saying you can forgive someone and forget if you want, and that allows you to find inner peace if you forget what they did. You don't have to bring them back into your life. And the way I look at it is, if I forgive you, I'm not going to forget what you did. If you did something severely wrong, I'm not going to bring you back into my life, because I know you're going to do it again. And I'm going to fall back into a cycle of repeating events because you did it again. It's like a learning lesson. You were a lesson. I learned from you. Some people are lessons. Some people are blessings.
Like, sometimes if you let somebody back in your life, sometimes you need that lesson learned again.
Oh, I do believe that. If you let them back into your life.
So, to be honest, I guess it's really just the trust of your gut. If you if that's really what you want to do, is let somebody back in your life, maybe that's what you need to learn again. And I mean, maybe some people change, but I really think, like you said, habit is character.
And if they did something once and then you bring them back into your life, that tells me you didn't learn the lesson already. Like Kelly said, that's so true, because it's like, you notice, like, you bring someone in, they hurt you once, and then you bring them back in, they hurt you twice. It's like, well, why'd you do that? Why are you going to put yourself in that situation to get hurt again? I've already said that if someone hurt you once, why are you going to put yourself in a situation to get hurt again by that person? It makes no sense. It makes no logical sense. I'm not going to get hurt again because you hurt me once. And I just think that it's best to not forget what they did. You can forget what they did if you want to and want to move on from that. Say they're a new person. But I feel like as much as someone tells you, even it doesn't even have to be, I mean, it obviously is a person. It doesn't have to be relationships. It could be friendships. It could be family. It could be anything. And they did something wrong. You should remember what that person did. Because they did it once, and maybe they made a mistake, and they're acknowledging they made a mistake, and you can let go of all resentment and say, I'm not going to forget what they did, but we can move on from it, but I'm going to remember in the back of my mind, you did do that at one point. Maybe you're not that person anymore, and you're going to tell me you're not that person anymore, but at one point you did do that. You committed that act. That's like if someone commits a crime. They did do that.
Oh, yeah.
They can't move on from it. They did it. Maybe they regret it, and maybe they wish they didn't do it, but they did do it.
It's almost like the things you do in life, you can never go back and, like, change them.
Yeah,
like,
that's
it's
why.
Like, they're there.
You need to be cautious to consider it, and think about that when you're in a situation with a person. Take the time to actually analyze them. Should I do this? Should I put myself in a position to hurt this person or lose this person? So I'm going to say, when I'm weighing on the side of each spectrum, I'm going to say forgive, but never forget. What are you going to say? What's the answer for you?
It's got to be forgive, but never forget.
So it's forgive and never forget.
Mm-hmm.